Bureau of Statistics figures show the Central Coast has more unemployed and less jobs than many other parts of the Sydney region. In the past year, the jobless rate has risen from 7.7 to 8.4%. In a bid to help those particularly hard hit, like women and young people, Gosford CES is organising special retraining courses. The idea is to have skills available when the job situation improves.
I'm aware of a couple of major international firms, Procter & Gamble for example, and the Mars Corporation, who run Master Foods, are in the process of relocating major factories up in the Wyong area. So clearly there's a need to boost that sort of activity. There have been some major successes, but the population is going to continue to grow, and it underscores the need to continue those efforts.
The Central Coast will always remain geographically a very attractive place to live. At the moment, the population growth is 3 times the state average. The problem is job opportunities just can't keep pace with that sort of increased demand.
We've got now upwards of 16,000 people a day commuting to either Newcastle or Sydney. That is an enormous torment on someone's life, particularly with family circumstances.
And it's those sort of stresses that put extra demand on welfare agencies like the Smith family. This organisation has recently put on 12 extra volunteers to cope with increasing calls for financial help in paying bills and providing food for families.
I would say we've probably had a 15% increase on last year's figures, and what we're going to have this year I think is going to be even worse, because we see that unemployment is again rising, which is a worry. We see the high rental factor is still with us, and these are things that bite very heavily into the income of the families.
Now, Gosford City Council has agreed to monitor unemployment figures on a monthly basis, and it could lead to a change in policy to help ease the situation for the area's 70,000 residents.
It was the recent Carrick report into education which brought the issue of preschool learning back into focus. The report found evidence that the sooner a child is exposed to learning, the better the long-term benefits. Alan Beard, the Hunter Region's Head of Education, says preschool should be more than just childminding. Speaking to the Newcastle Businessmen's Club today, Mr Baird threw his support behind initiatives which teach children to use their mind in an organised way.
The long-term results of some of the experiments conducted in the United States during the early 70s, where programs were provided to young children, is that there is a long-term effect, and the children who start their learning earlier are advantaged in the long run.
The Education Department has just released a resource kit for early childhood educators. Children are introduced to language, writing and maths through play. While research in the US shows that some children slow up about age 9 after an early start, the long-term benefits surface again at age 15. However, Mr Beard and teachers agree that any preschool learning is more effective with parents reinforcing the learning at home. John Church, NBN News.
Six years ago, a close friend of Don Parks went blind. That launched the Associate Professor on a mission to create a device that would open up many doors for those without sight. So he set about developing a system using a sensitive touchpad that would enable the blind to hear exactly what it was they were touching. And he named it after someone he believed best appreciated more than anyone how difficult the world of the blind can be.
NOMAD is named after a guide dog. Belonged to a student we had here.
Professor Parks has come a long way since that first primitive graphics pad. Today, he and the man who joined him on the project, computer programmer Richard Deere, have taken the NOMAD around the world, where its versatility has been recognised.
The Americans in a school that I went to felt that it had very wide application for other disabilities, special education areas, maybe for autistic children, maybe for children with other learning disabilities.
Plans are also afoot to program the NOMAD in 7 more languages. The graphic images can be bought or simply drawn up at home. They are touched, placed in the computer memory, and from then on, every time the user touches that image, the computer explains what it is.
We see the application mainly in the younger people, but there's no reason why older people wouldn't benefit from it. Our main driving force is and the children, of course. I mean, they're probably the most important sector of the community to help, and I'm sure they will benefit widely from it.
But while children in particular may benefit, perhaps the words of a 41-year-old man who'd been blind all his life best sums up what the NOMAD can do for someone. He said, "I have learnt more about the world map in just 2 hours than I have in the rest of my life."
Emergency crews found 3 vehicles scattered along the site about 300 metres south of the Putty turnoff. Police believe the northbound Toyota sedan went to the wrong side of the road, clipping an oncoming school bus, then spinning to collide head-on with a following vehicle. A 52-year-old woman from Windsor who was driving the Corona was trapped in the wreckage. Her passenger, a 40-year-old man from Ebenezer near Windsor, suffered fractured legs and internal injuries. Singleton ambulance crews were able to free him immediately. However, the woman remained in the vehicle for several hours. There were 4 people in the following car. 36-year-old Maureen Selwood of the ACT was airlifted to Singleton Hospital with suspected spinal injuries. Her husband Terry, 41, and their 2 children suffered only bruising. Rescuers at first feared that almost a dozen children were on board the school bus. The bus had just begun its regular morning pickup of school children on its way to Colo's school. Relieved rescuers found that only 1 child was on board at the time of the accident. The lone passenger, 7-year-old Brendan Pearce of Putty, was treated for cuts and abrasions and later released from Hawkesbury Hospital. Other children waiting at stops further down the road were unaware of the drama. Police say the Putty Road has a notorious reputation, but the new F3 freeway is diverting much of the traffic.
It's just one of those roadways. It's been renowned for badness over the years, but it's not such a bad road actually.
Hydraulic equipment arrived with a Cessnock rescue team about 2 hours after the smash. With paramedics and attendants, the seriously hurt woman was finally freed. But the battle was far from over. The ambulance rendezvoused with a care flight helicopter from Westmead Hospital. Doctors who arrived with the helicopter immediately performed a roadside operation. The woman was then airlifted to Westmead, where she remains tonight in a critical condition. Police investigations are continuing. Just as that crash scene was cleared, another spectacular smash on the F3 freeway near Brooklyn. Police say one semi-trailer had halted on a northbound lane when the second slammed into its rear at about 11:30. The driver of the following vehicle, an unidentified man from Dora Creek, was trapped in the wrecked cabin for more than an hour. He was taken to Hornsby Hospital and remains in a serious but stable condition. The accident closed northbound lanes for several hours while salvage crews cleared the wrecks, their loads and spilled diesel from the highway. Traffic was diverted along the old Pacific Highway. Tom Hilston, NBN News.
The reality of yesterday's package over industry restructuring between pharmacists and the government is only just beginning to sink in, and many chemists were waiting until tonight's meeting of the Newcastle and Hunter Valley Pharmacists Association to learn exactly what this compromise will mean to their businesses. According to Steve Kennedy, the real impact is still not known, since the Pharmacy Guild worked out the agreement behind closed doors. He expects tonight's meeting to be angry and vocal, especially from those pharmacies who face amalgamation or the axe.
The stupid thing is the pharmacies that are more likely to close are the ones that are probably of best service to the community. The pharmacies that by definition are more professional or have a higher proportion of their business as prescription, and especially prescriptions for low income or concessional or disadvantaged patients.
And for those that remain open, there will be an increased burden.
They'll be struggling very badly financially. Not only will they be getting less income, but they'll be expected to partially fund the closure of those pharmacies that have now left. So services will certainly have to be reduced. Numbers of pharmacies will have to be reduced. Staff, deliveries, all those things you traditionally associate with a good community pharmacy are going to be gradually diminished, eroded away, taken from you as a result of the government's decisions.
The Sikorsky S61, like this one, was heading for this offshore tanker loading facility in Shell's Brentfield when disaster struck. One report says the tail rotor of the aircraft collided with part of the loading platform before coming down in the sea and overturning. But British International helicopters who own the aircraft say they can't confirm that. This is the third incident involving one of their S61s in the past 2 years, but the first with fatalities. Seven hours after the accident, the survivors were airlifted to hospital in Aberdeen. Some of the 7 managed to walk to waiting ambulances. The more seriously injured had to be stretchered into casualty. The men had been seconds from landing on this offshore tanker loading facility in Shell's Brentfield when disaster struck.
As we were approaching the spar, I think the tail rotor hit the A-frame of the crane about 20 feet up and was spiralled into the deck and fell off the deck into the sea.
Doctors say the worst injured has a broken back. The other stretcher cases have chest and leg injuries. All are lucky to be alive. An RAF Nimrod pinpointed wreckage near the scene within hours of the crash, and tonight this is being brought ashore for examination by Department of Transport accident investigators. If the Sikorsky S61, similar to this one, did hit the water with force, it's unlikely its inbuilt buoyancy bags would have prevented it immediately overturning.
The advertisement inserted by Quiltax Proprietary Limited and authorised by its General Manager Hugh Mackenzie accuses the council of spending $6.9 million of ratepayers' funds on an economically unviable development. In denying the claim, the council says it's concerned the community is being misled by the advert.
It's totally misleading, and we believe that it could cause unnecessary concern to residents that live around the Toronto area.
The council claims the cost of the development, which includes a public library and car park, is $5.7 million. It also says the figures in the advertisement are wrong. It paid $500,000 for the land, not $1.5 million, and the building cost $5.7 million, not $5.3. The council also refutes the claim that the centre will be economically unviable. Instead, they say it has community support and will be in competition to the newly developed Wood Rising shopping complex owned by Quiltax.
And the people will get better service at better rates. So, you know, we're living in an area and a time that competition is doing the best for the public.
Mr Mackenzie, who authorised the advertisement, was unavailable for comment today. However, Deputy Mayor Bob Tussis is adamant that the development was funded by Council's own money, not ratepayers.
The money came from accounts that over the years, the sale of assets and that were acquired earlier, and they were used for any particular development that may crop up, such as this, which would be beneficial to the council and the community.
The council is seeking legal advice on the matter. Jodie McKay for NBN News. Earlier this year, reports that the Mayfield site was being considered were leaked from Newcastle Council. The suburb was said to be one of a number of areas being considered by Cleanaway to build a waste receival and treatment plant. Residents have been vocal in their opposition, with a meeting last week firmly rejecting any waste plant in the area. Today, though, Cleanaway ruled out Mayfield as the site for the facility. Although it does neighbour the city's major industries, it is too close to residential areas.
Basically, the Mayfield site was ruled out because the criterion of 2 kilometres from the nearest residential area was violated.
Dr Bridgman has just completed a report for Cleanaway on other possible sites in Newcastle. The company is now considering 12 locations, all of them close to industry and 2 kilometres from the nearest house. It is believed Kooragang Island is on the company's list of sites, but Dr Bridgman refused to say if it is the location. An environmental impact statement based on Dr Bridgman's report will be presented to Council next month. Jodie McKay for NBN News.
The new fees are one measure the Federal Airport Corporation is adopting to unclog Sydney Airport during its busiest operational times. The fees are expected to be about $200 per landing and could force up the price of an air ticket on a country commuter flight by 20%. It's a system that's been tested since late last year on non-commercial or charter aircraft between 7:30 and 10 a.m. and 4 and 6:30 p.m. The result halved the level of peak hour light aircraft traffic and encouraged the government to impose the fee on all aircraft.
Well, for a start, the industry is rather surprised at the speed in which it was initiated. They had talked about it, but there were a lot of other ideas they had in getting the aircraft into and out of Sydney more expeditiously. And to be hit yesterday with that sort of news was fairly devastating without even trying the other alternatives first.
Local operator Aero Pelican makes 13 return flights to Sydney each day. They and other larger services like Eastern believe they have sufficient passenger capacity to spread the cost burden over a large number of ticket sales. However, smaller commuter services further up the Hunter Valley like Yanda Airlines say the cost burden on a few passengers could force them out of the peak time slots. That's an effect all air services agree smacks of bias against country passengers.
It's more or less prejudicial towards smaller type aircraft because what they're trying to do is force small aircraft out. The argument is that the small aircraft takes up as much airspace as a larger aircraft, that they can make more revenue out of a bigger aeroplane than a smaller aeroplane. And we feel that the country passenger has as much right to travel to Sydney as an international passenger.
Writing on buses, considered a scourge to public transport, is being actively encouraged in schools. It's an idea that even the bus drivers have warmed to.
I think it's great. I think it's great for the kids to be able to do their own thing and it's very professionally done.
Students from 31 local state schools have taken to the paint pots to make these stick-on signs. Themes range from caring for the environment to computer studies, as well as the performing arts. Waratah Orthopaedic School made its mark with this work, depicting students and activities.
That's me, that's Julie. The one there that's pushing the other wheelchair is Kelly and the other one's Lauren.
Organiser Sue Lesk from the Department of School Education says it's a novel way to get the message across.
And I don't think I know of anywhere else in New South Wales where state schools have taken to the buses. It's been a great exercise in students being able to make their own statements about their own schools and have people see them on the buses, so publicly.
The school slogans will be seen on buses on many local routes for about the next 3 months. And unlike usual graffiti, they'll then be peeled off, causing no harm to the bus.
These pictures were taken by a horrified visitor at the Detroit Zoo who saw the man jump over the security fence and into the moat surrounding the chimpanzee enclosure. The chimp had fallen into the moat, and if it wasn't for its brave rescuer, zoo officials say it would have certainly drowned.
I walked up to him and I shook his hand and I said, "You're a damn fool, but thank you for saving our chimp."
Although the man wasn't concerned about his own safety, his family were. With chimpanzees about 4 times as strong as humans, the man was lucky to emerge with only a few scratches.
Emergency coastal radio monitoring has long been shared at Port Stephens by the Royal Volunteer Coastal Patrol and the Australian Volunteer Coast Guard. Both groups agree the service needlessly duplicates roles, but neither was willing to give up the job or amalgamate. Now the state government has approved a simple expedient. The port will be divided east and west of Soldiers Point. All operations to the east of Soldiers Point will be in the hands of the Coastal Patrol. All marine operations to the west go to the Coast Guard.
Under the previous setup, there were the Coast Guard and the Coastal Patrol both operated up and down the New South Wales coast together, often quite close as we are in Port Stephens. And it was sometimes confusing for a vessel who called in for advice, or worse, if he was in distress.
Depending on whether an incident was east or west of Soldiers Point, the relevant volunteer group would play a backup role, as it's always done, to the now officially appointed primary response group, the Nelson Bay Water Police.
The 40 members of the Okayama Judo team are on a mission, a Goodwill mission. They're being hosted by members of the Lake Macquarie Police Youth Club Judo team. It's a reciprocal arrangement. The local team toured Japan over 10 years ago, introducing girls to the then strictly male-dominated sport of Judo. The girls now outnumber the boys in the Japanese team, and while it was all smiles today, they'll get down to some serious competition on Thursday night at the Police Youth Centre. Mayor Ivan Welsh did his best to make the visitors feel at home. And with the formalities of a civic welcome over, met his match with a team member eager to demonstrate the sport. The hands of friendship blurred in a whirl of the ancient Japanese art of combat, much to the appreciation of the visitors. The judo team will be in the area for 6 days to enjoy some local hospitality and a little sightseeing.